long before his name shook the foundations of kingdoms, long before armies trembled at the sound of thundering hooves across the steppe. He was a child abandoned by destiny. Born around 1162 on the harsh and endless grasslands of Mongolia, Temujin, the boy who would later become Genghis Khan, entered a world ruled by survival. His people lived under open skies, surrounded by rival tribes, brutal winters, and constant warfare. He was not born into security, he was not born into power. In fact, his childhood was marked by betrayal, hunger, and loss. When Temujin was still young, his father, a tribal leader, was poisoned by enemies. Without protection, Temujin and his family were abandoned by their own clan. Left alone on the steppe, they struggled to survive, living off wild roots, hunting small animals, and fighting starvation. Many would have disappeared into history. Temujin did not. Captured by rival tribes, forced into slavery, betrayed by former allies. Temujin learned early that survival required strength, loyalty, and relentless determination. Over time, he gathered followers not through noble birth, but through trust and leadership. He rewarded loyalty and punished betrayal with ruthless efficiency. On the unforgiving Mongolian steppe, he began uniting scattered tribes that had fought each other for generations. And from those tribes, he built an army unlike anything the world had ever seen. By the early 1200s, Temujin had united the Mongol clans under one banner. He was given a new title, one that would echo across continents. Genghis Khan, universal ruler. Under his command, Mongol warriors rode across Asia and Europe with unmatched speed and discipline. Cities fell, empires collapsed, trade routes transformed, entire civilizations reshaped under the shadow of Mongol conquest. Within a single lifetime, Genghis Khan would create the largest continuous land empire in human history. But his story was not simply one of destruction. It was a story of transformation, leadership, innovation, and ambition powerful enough to reshape the world itself. The boy named Temujin. Long before the world trembled beneath the hooves of Mongol cavalry, before empires collapsed and continents burned, there was only a boy. His name was Temujin. Temujin was born around the year 1162 on the vast Mongolian steppe, a harsh and unforgiving land where survival depended on strength, loyalty, and endurance. The steppe was a world without cities, without walls, and without safety. Tribes moved constantly with their herds, following seasons, grasslands, and water. Life there was simple, but brutal. Temujin was born into the Borjigin clan, the son of a tribal leader named Yasujii. His father was respected among warriors and had alliances that protected their family from rival tribes. At first, Temujin's future seemed secure. But destiny rarely follows peaceful paths. When Temujin was only 9 years old, his father was poisoned by enemies from a rival tribe. The death of Yasujii shattered their family's protection overnight. Without a strong leader, their tribe abandoned Temujin's family completely. His mother Holun was left alone to raise her children in one of the most dangerous environments imaginable. They were no longer nobles. They were survivors. Temujin's childhood became a daily battle against hunger, cold, and betrayal. His family was forced to live off wild roots, fish, and whatever they could hunt. At times, starvation came so close that survival itself felt uncertain. But hardship shaped Temujin's character. He learned to endure pain, to observe danger, to trust only those who proved their loyalty. Even among his own brothers, tension grew. Struggles over food and authority created violent conflict. In one tragic moment of desperation, Temujin killed his older half-brother during a dispute, a moment that revealed how deeply survival ruled life on the steppe. The boy was already becoming something harder than ordinary. As Temujin grew older, rival tribes noticed his family's vulnerability. One day, he was captured by the Temujin tribe, former allies who now saw him as a threat. They enslaved him. Temujin was forced to live under guard, humiliated and chained, treated as property rather than a human being. For many, such captivity would have destroyed hope entirely. But Temujin refused to surrender to fate. With patience and courage, he eventually escaped with the help of a sympathetic guard who secretly freed him. The escape was dangerous and nearly impossible, but it marked a turning point in Temujin's life. He had lost his tribe, lost his father, lost his freedom. And yet, he survived. After his escape, Temujin began rebuilding connections. He sought out old allies of his father and slowly gathered supporters. Among them was Borte, the woman he married and who would remain a central figure in his life. But peace did not last long. Soon after their marriage, Borte was kidnapped by a rival tribe, a devastating personal loss that forced Temujin to act. To rescue her, he formed alliances with powerful tribal leaders, including Genghis Khan and his childhood friend Jamuka. Together, they launched a daring rescue mission. They succeeded. And Temujin gained something far more important than victory. He gained followers who believed in his leadership. Temujin began building a new kind of loyalty among his warriors. Unlike traditional tribal systems that favored noble bloodlines, he valued courage, skill, and loyalty above ancestry. This radical idea attracted many followers who had long been ignored by traditional leaders. Outcasts, warriors without status, families seeking protection. They began gathering under Temujin's banner. What started as a small group of survivors slowly grew into a rising force on the Mongolian steppe. But power brings conflict. Temujin's growing influence began threatening established tribal leaders, including Jamuka, his former blood brother. Their friendship slowly transformed into rivalry as their visions for leadership clashed. Jamuka believed in noble hierarchy. Temujin believed in merit and loyalty. The steppe would soon be forced to choose between them. And that choice would ignite wars that would reshape history forever. The abandoned boy, the escaped slave, the survivor of endless hardship, was no longer simply Temujin. He was becoming a leader. And soon, the entire steppe would learn his name. The unifier of the steppe. By the time Temujin reached adulthood, the Mongolian steppe was a land divided by endless rivalry. Tribes fought over grazing lands, water, horses, and honor. Alliances formed and shattered constantly. Betrayal was common, and survival often depended on strength rather than loyalty. No single leader had ever successfully united the steppe for long. Most warriors accepted this chaos as natural. Temujin saw it as weakness. After escaping slavery and rebuilding his strength, Temujin began gathering followers. But unlike traditional tribal leaders who relied on noble bloodlines, Temujin built his support through personal loyalty. He rewarded those who stood beside him, no matter their social rank. He promoted warriors based on ability rather than family status. This revolutionary idea attracted people from weaker clans, outcasts, and individuals who had little opportunity under traditional tribal systems. Slowly, his following grew. Not because he promised safety, but because he promised purpose. One of Temujin's earliest and most important alliances came through his friendship with Jamuka, a powerful noble warrior. The two men shared childhood bonds and once swore loyalty as blood brothers, a sacred steppe tradition symbolizing unbreakable unity. Together, they gathered supporters and fought against rival tribes. For a time, it seemed they would rule the steppe side by side. But history rarely allows two ambitious leaders to share one throne. Conflict soon grew between Temujin and Jamuka. Their visions for leadership were fundamentally different. Jamuka believed in traditional aristocratic rule, where noble families held power and ordinary warriors followed orders. Temujin rejected this structure. He believed loyalty and skill should determine leadership, not birth. Their disagreement became war. Former brothers became bitter enemies, dividing tribes across the steppe. Battles between their forces were fierce and deeply personal. Victory in the steppe required not only military skill, but psychological dominance. Temujin understood both. During his campaigns, Temujin began introducing military innovations that would later define Mongol warfare. He reorganized tribal warriors into structured military units, breaking traditional clan loyalties and replacing them with loyalty to him alone. Armies were divided into groups of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, creating disciplined and flexible formations capable of moving quickly across vast distances. This system transformed scattered tribal fighters into a unified fighting force. It also ensured that personal loyalty shifted from tribe to commander to empire. Temujin also enforced strict discipline among his followers. Theft, desertion, and betrayal were punished severely, but loyalty was rewarded with protection, wealth, and status. For many warriors, serving Temujin offered something rare on the steppe: stability. He created laws known later as the Yasa, a code that regulated military behavior, social conduct, and governance. Though harsh, the laws created order in a land long ruled by chaos. Temujin was not simply gathering soldiers. He was building a society. Yet his rise was far from easy. Powerful rival tribes repeatedly attempted to destroy him. The Tatars, Merkits, Naimans, and other confederations saw Temujin as a dangerous threat to their independence. Large coalitions formed to stop his growing influence. Time and again, Temujin faced enemies with greater numbers and stronger alliances. And time and again, he defeated them. One of his greatest strengths was adaptability. Temujin learned from every victory and every defeat. He studied enemy tactics, improved communication systems, and emphasized mobility. Mongol horsemen trained to ride for days without rest, carrying multiple horses to maintain speed during long campaigns. They mastered mounted archery, striking enemies from a distance while moving rapidly across open terrain. Their ability to attack, retreat, and return unexpectedly confused even experienced armies. War on the steppe became fast, unpredictable, and terrifying. Under Temujin, warfare itself began to change. Gradually, rival tribes fell one by one. Some were destroyed in battle. Others surrendered and joined Temujin's growing confederation. Rather than eliminating conquered people entirely, Temujin often absorbed them into his forces, strengthening his army with new skills and manpower. Blacksmiths, craftsmen, strategists, and warriors from defeated tribes were integrated into Mongol society. Each conquest made him stronger. Each victory expanded his vision. The final challenge came when Temujin defeated his former ally Jamuka in a decisive conflict. With his greatest rival removed, Temujin stood unmatched across the Mongolian steppe. For the first time in history, the scattered Mongol tribes were united under one leader. The steppe, once divided by endless conflict, now followed a single banner. And that banner carried the name Temujin. But his transformation was not yet complete. In 1206, tribal leaders gathered in a great assembly known as a Kurultai. Chiefs, warriors, and nobles from across the steppe met to decide the future of their united people. There, Temujin received a new title, one that would echo across continents and centuries. Genghis Khan, universal ruler. The boy abandoned on the steppe. the slave who escaped chains, the warrior who united rival tribes, had become the leader of a new nation. But unity was only the beginning, because Genghis Khan was not content with ruling the Mongols alone. He was preparing to reshape the world beyond the horizon. The birth of the Mongol war machine. In 1206, when Temujin was proclaimed Genghis Khan, the Mongolian steppe had never seen such unity. For generations, tribes had fought endlessly for survival. Now, for the first time, they followed a single ruler. But Genghis Khan understood something crucial. Unity alone would not secure his future. Unity required strength, and strength required transformation. He needed to turn scattered tribal warriors into the most powerful military force the world had ever seen. Genghis Khan began reshaping Mongol society entirely around warfare and discipline. He broke traditional tribal structures that encouraged internal loyalty and replaced them with a system that demanded loyalty to the empire. His army was organized into a strict decimal structure. Groups of 10 soldiers formed a unit, 10 units formed a larger group, and so on until massive formations of 10,000 warriors could move as one coordinated force. This system created flexibility, speed, and control unmatched by any army of the time. Warriors no longer fought for their clans. They fought for Genghis Khan. Training under Mongol command was relentless. From childhood, Mongol boys learned to ride horses before they could walk steadily. Archery, hunting, survival, and combat became daily life. By adulthood, Mongol warriors were among the most skilled mounted fighters in history. Each soldier typically controlled several horses, allowing them to switch mounts during long campaigns. This gave Mongol armies extraordinary mobility, enabling them to travel hundreds of kilometers with incredible speed. To enemies, Mongol forces seemed to appear from nowhere, strike without warning, and vanish into the horizon. Mounted archery became their deadliest weapon. Mongol warriors could fire arrows accurately while riding at full speed. They developed tactics involving feigned retreats, drawing enemy forces into pursuit before turning suddenly to attack from multiple directions. Opposing armies, unfamiliar with such fluid movement, often fell into confusion and panic. Genghis Khan encouraged adaptability. Generals were allowed to modify tactics based on terrain, weather, and enemy behavior. Communication systems using flags, drums, horns, and mounted messengers allowed Mongol armies to coordinate attacks across vast distances. Battle under Genghis Khan became a carefully calculated storm. But his strength did not rely solely on combat skill. Genghis Khan valued intelligence and information. Before invading new territories, Mongol scouts gathered detailed knowledge about geography, trade routes, political divisions, and military strength. Spies infiltrated enemy regions, reporting weaknesses and internal conflicts. He believed victory began long before the first arrow was fired. And often it did. Genghis Khan also revolutionized military inclusion. Unlike many rulers who rejected foreign knowledge, he actively recruited engineers, scholars, and specialists from conquered territories. Siege warfare, previously unfamiliar to Mongol nomads, became one of their most powerful tools after incorporating Chinese and Persian expertise. They learned to construct catapults, siege towers, and explosive weapons, allowing them to attack heavily fortified cities that once believed themselves untouchable. The Mongol army evolved constantly. Each conquest became a lesson. Each enemy became a teacher. By the early 13th century, Genghis Khan turned his attention beyond the Mongolian steppe. The world beyond his homeland was filled with powerful kingdoms, wealthy cities, and ancient empires. His first major campaigns targeted the Western Xia Kingdom and the Jin dynasty in northern China. These were not small tribal conflicts. They were wars against organized states with fortified cities, professional armies, and vast populations. Many believed Mongol horsemen could never defeat such civilizations. Genghis Khan proved them wrong. Mongol armies moved with terrifying speed across northern China, devastating enemy forces and capturing major strongholds. They combined mobility with siege technology, adapting to unfamiliar landscapes while maintaining strategic coordination. Cities that surrendered were often spared and integrated into Mongol administration. Cities that resisted sometimes faced complete destruction, a deliberate psychological strategy designed to discourage further resistance. Fear became one of Genghis Khan's most powerful weapons. Stories of Mongol invasions spread faster than his armies themselves, causing some regions to surrender before battle even began. Yet Genghis Khan did not seek destruction alone. He also focused on stability and governance. Trade routes across conquered territories were protected, allowing merchants to travel safely under Mongol control. Diplomatic envoys were respected, and skilled individuals were often protected and relocated to strengthen the empire. He understood that empire building required more than conquest. It required administration, cooperation, and order. The Mongol Empire began transforming into a vast network connecting East Asia, Central Asia, and eventually parts of Europe. Communication systems were built across the empire, including relay stations that allowed messages and travelers to move rapidly across enormous distances. For the first time in centuries, trade routes such as the Silk Road experienced unprecedented security under Mongol protection. The empire was not only expanding territory, it was connecting civilizations. By this stage, Genghis Khan had created something history had never seen before, a military machine capable of conquering continents, supported by an administrative system capable of controlling them. His warriors were loyal, his generals were innovative, his empire was growing beyond imagination. But beyond China and the steppe lay an even greater target. The powerful kingdoms of Central Asia and Persia, wealthy regions filled with massive cities, advanced culture, and vast trade networks. And their rulers would soon make a decision that would unleash one of the most devastating campaigns in human history. The storm that swept across continents. By the early 13th century, Genghis Khan had already transformed the Mongol tribes into the most feared military force in Asia. Northern China had fallen under his expanding empire. Trade routes were opening, and the Mongol banner stretched across the steppe like never before. But Genghis Khan was not finished. Beyond Mongolia and China lay one of the richest and most powerful regions in the world, Central Asia and the Persian territories controlled by the Khwarezm Empire. It was a vast kingdom filled with thriving cities, wealthy trade centers, and powerful armies. At first, Genghis Khan did not seek war with them. He sought trade. Genghis Khan sent a diplomatic caravan to establish peaceful relations with the Khwarezm ruler, Shah Muhammad II. The caravan carried merchants and envoys, hoping to open trade routes between East and West under Mongol protection. Instead, disaster struck. Local officials in a Khwarezm city accused the Mongol caravan of espionage. The merchants were executed. Their goods were seized. When Genghis Khan sent diplomats demanding justice, the Khwarezm ruler responded with an insult that would echo through history. He executed one envoy and humiliated the others. For Genghis Khan, this was more than political conflict. It was a declaration of war. In 1219, Genghis Khan launched one of the most devastating military campaigns ever recorded. The Mongol army advanced westward with incredible speed and coordination. Instead of attacking in a single formation, Genghis Khan divided his forces into multiple armies that moved across vast distances simultaneously, confusing enemy defenses and striking cities from unexpected directions. Khwarezm's vast territory, once its greatest strength, became its greatest weakness. Communication between its cities collapsed. Armies struggled to unite. Panic spread rapidly, and the Mongols moved like a storm across the desert. One by one, major cities fell. Otrar, Bokhara, Samarkand, some of the most important cultural and commercial centers in Central Asia, faced Mongol siege warfare that combined military precision with psychological terror. Genghis Khan personally led assaults that demonstrated both strategic brilliance and ruthless determination. Cities that surrendered were often spared and incorporated into the Mongol Empire, but cities that resisted sometimes faced devastating consequences. The destruction sent a clear message across the region. Resistance meant annihilation. The capture of Bokhara became legendary. According to historical accounts, Genghis Khan entered the city and addressed its people directly, declaring that he had come as punishment for corruption and betrayal. Whether exaggerated or true, the moment symbolized the overwhelming authority he projected across conquered lands. From Central Asia, Mongol forces advanced deeper into Persia, crushing resistance across modern-day Iran and surrounding regions. Entire armies collapsed under Mongol mobility and coordination. The Khwarezm Empire, once a dominant power, was destroyed within a few years. Its ruler fled across his collapsing kingdom, dying in isolation while his empire vanished behind him. But Genghis Khan's campaigns did not stop there. His generals pushed further west, entering regions of Eastern Europe and the Caucasus. Mongol armies defeated combined forces of Russian princes and allied European troops in battles that shocked the medieval world. Kingdoms that had never heard of Mongolia suddenly found themselves facing Mongol cavalry on their borders. Stories spread across continents describing warriors who moved faster than any army before them, fought with unmatched discipline, and appeared unstoppable. Genghis Khan had become more than a conqueror. He had become a legend. Yet within his expanding empire, Genghis Khan focused heavily on governance. He promoted religious tolerance, allowing multiple faiths to coexist under Mongol rule. Merchants were protected. Trade flourished across territories that had once been divided by war. He established communication networks stretching thousands of kilometers, allowing information, orders, and trade goods to move faster than ever before. The Mongol Empire began connecting east and west in ways never seen in human history. Cultures, technologies, and knowledge flowed across continents under Mongol protection. Despite his reputation for destruction, Genghis Khan believed strongly in loyalty and order. He rewarded generals who succeeded regardless of their background. He enforced strict laws to maintain stability within his empire. He also prepared carefully for succession, knowing that such a vast empire would require strong leadership after his death. But even the most powerful rulers cannot escape time. By the 1220s, Genghis Khan had built the largest continuous land empire in history. From the Pacific shores of Asia to the western edges of Central Asia and Eastern Europe, his influence stretched across millions of square kilometers. He had begun life as an abandoned child struggling for survival on the Mongolian steppe. Now, he ruled territories larger than any empire before him. Yet his final campaign would remain unfinished, and his death would become one of history's greatest mysteries. The death of a conqueror, the birth of a legacy. By the 1220s, Genghis Khan ruled an empire unlike anything the world had ever seen. From the vast grasslands of Mongolia to the deserts of Central Asia, from the mountains of Persia to the borders of Eastern Europe, his empire stretched across continents. Kingdoms had fallen, trade routes had transformed, entire civilizations had been forced to adapt to the rise of Mongol power. Yet, even the most unstoppable conqueror cannot defeat time. In 1226, Genghis Khan launched what would become his final campaign against the Western Xia Kingdom, a region in northwestern China that had previously submitted to Mongol rule but later rebelled. Despite his age, Genghis Khan personally led the invasion. His leadership style never changed. He believed rulers must stand alongside their warriors, even in the harshest conditions. The campaign was brutal and relentless. Mongol forces swept across western Xia territory, destroying resistance and forcing cities to surrender one after another. Victory seemed inevitable. But during this campaign, something changed. In 1227, Genghis Khan died under mysterious circumstances. Historical records conflict, and the exact cause of his death remains unknown. Some accounts suggest he died after falling from a horse during battle. Others claim illness or injuries weakened him over time. A few legends describe secret events that were intentionally hidden to preserve stability within the empire. What is certain is that his death was kept secret from enemies until the campaign was complete. Even in death, Genghis Khan commanded victory. Western Xia fell soon after, fulfilling his final military objective. According to Mongol tradition, Genghis Khan was buried in a secret location somewhere within Mongolia. The exact burial site has never been confirmed. Legends claim that those who attended his funeral eliminated all witnesses to preserve its secrecy. To this day, the tomb of Genghis Khan remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. The conqueror who ruled continents was hidden by the very land that raised him. But Genghis Khan's story did not end with his death. It was only the beginning of something far larger. Before he died, he carefully organized succession among his sons and generals. Instead of allowing his empire to collapse into civil war, he divided authority while preserving loyalty to Mongol leadership. His descendants continued expanding the empire with unstoppable momentum. Under his son Ogdi Khan, Mongol armies pushed deeper into China and completed the destruction of the Jin dynasty. Mongol generals advanced westward into Eastern Europe, defeating Russian kingdoms, Hungarian forces, and armies that had never before faced steppe warfare. Later generations, including Kublai Khan, would establish the Yuan dynasty in China, ruling as emperors over one of the most advanced civilizations in the world. Within decades of Genghis Khan's death, the Mongol Empire became the largest land empire in recorded history, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe and the Middle East. His vision had outlived him. The Mongol Empire reshaped global history in ways few leaders ever have. Trade across the Silk Road flourished under Mongol protection, connecting East Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Ideas, technologies, and cultural influences spread across continents faster than ever before. Gunpowder knowledge moved westward. Scientific and medical knowledge traveled eastward. Diplomats and merchants crossed territories that had once been deadly frontiers. For a time, much of Eurasia existed under what historians call the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative stability created by Mongol control. Yet Genghis Khan's legacy remains deeply complex. His conquests brought immense destruction and loss of life across vast regions. Entire cities were erased from history. Civilizations were forced to rebuild after devastating invasions. At the same time, his empire created unprecedented cultural exchange, trade expansion, and political transformation. He was both builder and destroyer, visionary and conqueror, hero to some, villain to others. Perhaps what makes Genghis Khan unforgettable is not only what he conquered, but where he began. He was not born into royal power. He did not inherit armies or empires. He rose from abandonment, slavery, betrayal, and survival on the harsh Mongolian steppe. Through leadership, discipline, and relentless ambition, he forged unity where none had existed before. He turned scattered tribes into a global empire. And he proved that even the most unlikely origins can shape the course of history. The thunder of Mongol cavalry eventually faded. Empires rose and fell after him. But the name Genghis Khan never disappeared. It remains carved into the memory of continents, echoing across battlefields, trade routes, and history itself. The rider who changed the world. And so, the story of Genghis Khan rides slowly into legend. A child abandoned by his tribe, a survivor of slavery and betrayal, a warrior who rose from the endless Mongolian steppe to command armies that shook the foundations of continents. He united tribes that had fought for generations, that he built an empire that stretched farther than any before him. He transformed trade, warfare, and global connection in ways the world still feels today. Genghis Khan did not simply conquer land. He reshaped history itself. His empire would eventually divide. His armies would fade into time. But the world he changed never returned to what it once was. Across Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, his legacy remains written in borders, cultures, and stories passed down through centuries. To some, he was a destroyer. To others, a visionary leader. To history, he became something far greater. A symbol of power born from survival. And somewhere, across the winds of the Mongolian steppe, where the grass moves like waves beneath the open sky, the echoes of galloping hooves still carry his name. Genghis Khan,